Hey friend, this is the Traveling Wellnesspreneur podcast, and I'm your host, Allie Temple. I travel full-time running my dream wellness biz from the tropics, and I want to share with you how you can create a lifestyle of freedom and purpose too. Stay tuned for inspiring and fun conversations that will empower you to take action towards your dream lifestyle of travel and freedom. Let's get into it. Welcome back, Wellnesspreneur. Today I'm sharing part one of my two-part conversation with yoga business coach, Amy McDonald. Amy is a very wise friend of mine who I had the pleasure of receiving her business coaching back in 2021. I'm also a Patreon supporter of hers, and I went to her annual Abundant Yoga Teacher Retreat in Thailand at the beginning of this year, which you'll hear more about throughout this two-part conversation. In Amy's Patreon membership, earlier this year, she shared about her unique experience on traveling to Thailand and beyond as a traveling foreigner, and this is why I wanted to have her on the show to share some of her wisdom with you. In today's episode, Amy shares some hilarious and unexpected stories about spending time in Thailand, India, and Bali with us. She also gives us some practical tips on how we can be respectful as foreigners traveling to new countries. You do not want to miss this one, and stay tuned for next week when I share part two of the conversation. Now, before we get into today's episode, I want to make sure that you know about my Facebook group for yoga teachers, healers, and wellness entrepreneurs who are working on growing their biz and creating offerings that sell. So I share a monthly live free training exclusively in this group, and the next live training is coming up on December 22nd. So if you're catching this before that in 2023, sign up and join us in this Facebook group so that you can join me live in this next upcoming training. This training is going to focus on more strategies that you can implement to grow your biz in 2024. So check out the show notes for the link and join us in that group as soon as you can. I hope to see you at that next live training. There will also be a replay available. It stays only in the group, and it'll be around for a couple of weeks after in case you can't join us live. So let's get back to Amy and let's jump into this part one of my conversation with Amy. Amy McDonald is a yoga student, teacher, and business coach. She hosts workshops and events around the world, as well as running the Keep Growing Mastermind and one-to-one private coaching for yoga teachers and wellnesspreneurs who are great at what they do but need help getting out of overwhelm and into aligned action. Listen to her free trainings on the Abundant Yoga Teacher podcast, and you can check out the show notes for links to learn more about Amy's programs and to connect with her on Instagram. Let's get into it. Welcome, Amy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me on your show. It's nice after having you on my show. This feels fun.
I know. This is super fun for me because the last time you and I were together IRL would have been earlier this year at your retreat in Thailand, the Abundant Yoga Teacher Retreat, which I was lucky enough to get to attend this past year, which was almost a year ago now. So crazy.
I know.
And this is a conversation that I'm really, really excited about because you have such a unique perspective and experience with travel. And before we get into all of that, I would love to hear just a little bit about where you are right now to let everyone know you don't travel full time, but you do travel quite a bit. And we'll get more into the Thailand travel in a moment. But where are you joining us from today?
So right now I am at my house. I live in an old cottage. It was built in 1861 in the country in Victoria, Australia. And I live in a little town, which I really love. And I also love being away from it about half the time. So I'm not like you say, I'm too much of a homebody to be able to be a constant traveler. I gave that a bit of a try and it wasn't for me. But I also have the itch. So about half time, I like to be somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a nice balance. I think the
Hmm.
longer I go, kind of nomadic, the more I'm realizing, like, it might be nice to just have a landing pad. So, especially, it seems like you have such a beautiful spot in nature, and with like, from what I imagine, you have kind of no neighbors, or if you do have neighbors, they're keep to themselves and that kind of thing, which is just a dream for an introvert and an empath like myself.
Indeed. Indeed. And I have an elderly fur housemate, so I,
Yes.
need to spend as much time with him as I can.
Right. And you get out, you go camping and smaller
Yeah.
trips quite a bit, and you get to
Yeah.
bring him on those, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. So, with the retreat that you run
Mhm.
annually, you've been doing this for so many years, and
Mm.
I know a handful of reasons why, but can you bring us back to how you started really just spending time in Thailand and what keeps bringing you back to Thailand? Let's go from there.
Okay. When I finished high school, my dad had a company that built a relationship with the Indonesian government. And so my parents and my sister moved to Jakarta and they lived there for a time while I was working somewhere else in Europe. And I think that got the itch for my dad to sort of enjoy living in Southeast Asia. So when that all wrapped up, he took a job in Bangkok at the Australian Embassy and moved there, and then has been there ever since. He has a partner who's Thai. They've been together for like 20 years or something. And I guess that's the first time I ever went to Thailand. I was with my partner at the time. I think I just finished university, and we went to stay with my dad in his condo and then do a little bit of exploring. And that was it. I've been sold on it as a great place to go ever since. And I go there to teach my retreat and also to spend time with my family.
And you also did some teacher trainings there back in the day as well, right?
Yep. So I went on my first ever retreat there as a participant actually at the center where I teach my retreats now. That was in 2008, I think. And then that teacher put on a 200-hour teacher training also in northern Thailand 6 months later. So I bought that. And then I've, in addition, have been doing my own retreat in Thailand. So, the first one I taught was in 2009. So I've been
Yes.
going there for a
Wow.
while.
Yeah, a while. Just a little while. And always at the same space, right? The same venue. That's amazing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I want
Yeah.
to circle back to that piece in a little bit because that is so
Sure.
interesting. And like, there's a lot we can cover there as business owners and for everyone who's planning retreats and thinking about retreats. When you go back each year, like you said, you go visit your dad and
Mhm.
you spend some time there before the retreat. How long do you usually go back for?
To Thailand in general?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it depends. The most I've had is like a 6-month visa. At the moment, I think Australians can get a visa on arrival for 30 days. So this year, I'm heading back on Christmas Eve and I think it's just over 3 weeks I'll be there. But as far as
Nice.
how long do I stay with my family? Well, that's a question of spiritual chops and how long can anybody stay with their family, I
Understood.
suspect.
Definitely understand that. Yes.
Especially, and it's a very small village where
Mhm.
everybody has to come and say hello or at least have a look at me when I'm there. So
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's a lot.
So when you say they have to have a look at you, can you explain that a little more?
Well, I used to be fascinating because I had a shaved head for a very long time. And I remember the first, so my dad, he lived in Bangkok to start. Then he and his partner moved out to sort of urban fringe. And now they live in her village, her family village in the family home, which is very remote from a tourist's perspective. My dad's the only the only foreigner in the village and the surrounding villages. And I remember the first time I ever went out to their house in the country, and my dad's partner's mother was still alive then, a tiny little lady. And the first thing she said to me was that my hair was really ugly. And then she like totally just felt my boobs to see. And because she was so impressed with how fat my breasts were, she thought were fantastic. And I thought, okay, well,
Wow.
welcome,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
and at the time of year that I go and be with my family is generally around New Year's Eve, as not by the Thai calendar, which has a different calendar to what we use, but it's so Pimai, or our version of New Year, which is a very popular time for people to have engagement parties and weddings. And so the villages and surrounding villages are abuzz with people's families coming in from the cities, lots of family reunions, lots of marquees and tables and bands and music. And it's kind of it's not auspicious. And obviously this makes me sound like an idiot, but there is something about having foreigners come to your engagement party is a little bit of a status symbol. So I visit a lot of engagement parties and wish a lot of people well.
Yeah.
Which is so weird, but
Yeah. And this is the interesting perspective, because like I never would have known that was a thing. And
it's a thing.
When many of us go back to see our families over the holidays, and some things are relatable and some things are just totally different. So I imagine you in this little village kind of being patrolled around as the celebrity.
It is. And yes, and my stepmother, she tries to sort of play it down. Like she'll say, do you want to go for a walk? And I'm thinking, oh, here we go. Everybody who comes past on a scooter is going to pull over and ask me the same questions as, what are you eating?
Yes.
Is it too hot for you? Like, I don't have a lot of Thai, but those standard questions, I've got those down because that's what everyone wants to ask me.
Yeah. Well, one of the very few things I learned in Thailand when I was there for a year, which is very sad, is the greeting. The general greeting is kind of like, have you eaten? Or what have you eaten? Like, it's all about food, which I love, as it should be, because the food is freaking amazing. It's so funny, the things that you wouldn't think about as a foreigner coming to these countries. So you kind of have to mentally prepare yourself for that situation as you get to Thailand, which for many of us Westerners visiting Thailand are putting ourselves into a much different scenario.
Yes.
And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to chat with you today, because you have this unique perspective. And as I am a Patreon member of your Patreon, and you offer these podcasts that are just for your Patreon subscribers. And this is loosely based off of a podcast that you shared after your time in Thailand earlier this year. You shared a little bit about your thoughts on travel as Westerners and what you've experienced in the past and what you want to be focusing on moving forward and what you don't want to be doing anymore. And I think that it's such an important thing to talk about, because myself, as someone who is traveling to these foreign countries and also working remotely and looking for ways to find that balance of, being comfortable with work and having everything I need in order to be successful on that end, but also being respectful of the communities and the cultures. And that is something that we don't always hear about. And from your experience, I would love to hear a little bit from you about anything that you would suggest for those of us like me, or those who are considering going to a foreign country, whether it's just a work vacay for a few weeks or longer term. And we're going into these communities and these cultures that we don't necessarily know anything about, really. We can do a little bit of research online and learn a few things. But from your experience, is there anything that you would suggest? Like, where does someone start when they're thinking of going to, especially the smaller villages that appear to be more remote to those of us who are from Western countries? Where would you say we should start when we're preparing for that kind of thing?
This is such a massive question. I want to try and think of some succinct things to say. I think we all have to just have the intention of trying to do our best, and inevitably we'll make faux pas, right? I remember earlier in the year I was in Jaipur. I was doing a block printing workshop. There was a couple, we were goofing around. They were teasing each other. They were newlyweds. They'd only been married for 6 months, and I said something off the cuff, as I would have said to a newlywed couple here, and about how cute, they're still really flirty with each other. And they said to me, "Oh, this is an arranged marriage." And actually, they were being fun and flirty with each other because they were kind of still getting to know each other. That's such a foreign thing to me. I didn't even clock it as a possibility. And I thought, oh, you freaking idiot, Amy. Like, you just imposed all of your freaking white bullshit onto this couple. I've been traveling for a minute. It didn't even dawn on me. So I think we have to try to do our best and also understand that we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay too. And having an openness to talk about, to the degree that it's appropriate for the people that you're with, to talk about it when you do get it wrong and ask if you can get it right the next time, I think one of the things, and those Patreon podcasts are particularly spicy. That's why they're behind the paywall. But I think that I've been in yoga land for a while now. I remember the first time I went to Ubud was I was 19. It was a very different place to what it's like now. I remember going to some of the first ever Bali Spirit festivals. I'm jaded and cynical when it comes to white spiritual enclaves where wellness people, spiritual white people, go because the cost of living is cheap. Mm-hmm. And they expect to be treated in the same way and to receive the same amount of support and access to resources that they would somewhere else, but they want to capitalize on the fact that the cost of living is reduced. One of the things that really annoys me is where they do become enclaves, where the people in these places don't integrate remotely with the people who actually live there. And I think we can all do better on that front. I remember, I think it was maybe 2011, I was at the Bali Spirit Festival and leaving, and there was people outside of the grounds who had made up food, and they were selling it to, like a bit of a side hustle business. Let's sell some food to people while there's loads of people in town. And I bought some food and got ridiculously unwell, more for me. But there was, people who had scooters were also doing the same thing. We can do a bit of Uber-y kind of driving people around and make some extra money. And I just remember this woman came out of the festival. She had a freaking yoga mat slung over her shoulder, and she was wearing tiny shorts and a bikini top. And she jumped on the back of this dude's motorcycle and off she went. And I just thought, F you. I don't know about you're politer than me, Ellie, but if it was my podcast.
Go for it.
Okay. I just thought, fuck you, lady. This is not your culture. Maybe this guy's thinking, lucky me, I might get to touch some boobs. I don't know. Who knows? But at the same time, everybody else this is not what people wear here. Just put on a freaking t-shirt. When you're in the festival, sure, have at it. But just a little bit of sensitivity about, is anybody else getting around in their swimming costume? No. Maybe I shouldn't either. I think it's actually a really powerful yogic principle to be more aware of the collective and notice what's going on. I liken it to, I remember, trigger warning, I remember being at a workshop with John Friend back before Anusara blew up in Sydney, and he was talking about when you do a great Om as a group, right? And it just, when it just feels amazing, the way that it feels amazing is because you're kind of attuned to the sound that everybody else is making, and you harmonize. And that's what makes it just those oh yes kind of sounds. But you get one person who's just determined to be the person that everybody needs to hear, and then the whole experience is wrong. And John Friend called it an over-omer. Sometimes you get an over-omer, and without that sensitivity, it wrecks it for the collective. And I feel like, that same level of sensitivity, we can bring it to when we're traveling in places where we are the foreigner, we are the outsider. We shouldn't presume that our way is the right way. And if we're just being more aware of what's going on, I think we're just less likely to fuck things up. I remember my dad's house before he moved to the country, there was not a 7-Eleven, but a privately owned, independent kind of similar convenience store. And so when you get to a store like that, if there are shoes out the front, then that's an indicator to you to take your shoes off to go into the convenience store. Would you take your shoes off at a 7-Eleven here? Of course you wouldn't. But you can just notice, okay, there's shoes here, so probably I'm going to take mine off because everybody else has taken theirs off as well. It doesn't take much. If women are walking around with their shoulders always in t-shirts and no singlets, good. Maybe try that as well. Yeah. And I think those things are really valued by the people that live there. Having been a bit of time now in that part of Asia, I think that social cues that we would expect from someone else to guide or modify our own behavior, we can't presume are cross-cultural. And so someone might be smiling at you and seeming to be very gracious and accommodating. That doesn't mean that they're okay with your behavior. And so you do need to be more sensitive, because displeasure is managed and expressed in different ways across cultures. And we could make terribly offensive faux pas and have no idea, because the person that's bringing us our food or letting us out, their spare room or whatever, needs our business and just deals with our shit because of the financial exchange or because of the cultural imperative or whatever.
Yeah.
So hoping that the other person will let you know if you've got it wrong sometimes isn't enough either.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So going into this situation, being really aware of your surroundings and sensitive to the culture is probably number one then, right? Then not expecting the social cues to be the same as what you're used to from wherever you are coming from.
Yeah.
And you brought up being sensitive a few times and being aware. So it's us as wellness entrepreneurs. It's a good reminder for us to walk the walk and to be present with our surroundings and not just insert ourselves into a situation because it benefits us, but consider how we can give back to the culture as well. I think that just brings me to ask you, is there anything you could recommend when we do visit other cultures, so we know how to kind of be aware and sensitive and adaptable? But is there anything you would recommend in how we can give back to these cultures when we are visiting them? Anything more tangible in how we can show our respect and our gratitude for spending time in their communities?
If you give yourself a little bit of time and you notice, then it can be really small things. Like I know in Thailand, less so in Bangkok or the big cities, but definitely once you get out into the countryside, little things like in Thailand, it's a sign of respect to be lower than your superior. So when I go home, one of the things I make sure, when I'm saying greeting everybody, anybody who's my senior, my stepmother, her sister, etc., I have to duck down so that I'm shorter than they are. And that's just a cultural thing. Same with monks, definitely statues of the Buddha, etc. When I'm out walking in the rice paddies, just getting away from my family, if I pass some dude, some farmer who's like, Farong, you're lost. Like, what are you doing out here, lady? If I just duck my head a little bit, he knows straight away that I understand that I'm the visitor, this is his place, and also that I kind of get it. Takes nothing for me to do that. Instantly, that person and I have an understanding that we didn't have before. So these little things can make such a big difference. If you don't have time or the great privilege of being able to just hang out in places where people like you might not always hang out, I think a super easy way is to just shop local, buy from people who are running businesses who live there, and it gets to be fun. I was in Phuket for a friend's villa in this tiny fishing village in January, and I just developed this great friendship with the woman who had a tiny little quickie mart where I'd get drinking water and stuff. By the end of it, she gave me a calendar of the king, which is a really big deal, and you got to take it with you and you can't throw it out.
I hope that's your main calendar still.
Are you kidding? Once you get it, you have to have it forever. Just because I could have got the supermarket to deliver me food, I could have hired a car and gone into Tesco, Lotus, whatever, or I could just go to this lady, have a chat every day, buy my shit, come home, nice. Like, just spend your money. We all get seduced into the boutiques and yaya acai bullshit bowls, whatever, cafes in all of these enclaves, but try and lay some money down with people who will just have actual real businesses who are set up for everybody, not just selling stuff to people like us.
Yes. Yeah. Such a good point. And that's something that translates anywhere you go.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
And it's such a simple idea. And I think it also relates to just being aware and present with your surroundings and considering how you can give back and what you can purchase locally in that day. And that's such a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
That's it for now. Thanks so much for joining me. And until next time, let's stay connected. Follow me on Instagram at Ali Temple Yoga. Join us in the Traveling Wellnesspreneurs Facebook group. And if you enjoyed this episode, please take a minute to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. See you next time.